We will live one day in the life of a Japanese samurai, and at the same time scare them a couple of stereotypes, learn about their lives, and of course the movie 47 Ronin with Keanu Reeves. Meet our samurai, Xiang Zi. It's 1610 and Xiang Zi is the most ordinary of the 400,000 samurai of that era. He serves his daimyo not far from the castle of Hisdi, which is located in the prefecture of Higwa. Shinji's task is simple. He guards the castle of the Lord, for which in Europe would have long received the title of ordinary guardian, but we are in Japan and here Xiangzi, a samurai, albeit belonging to the lowest caste. Just above stands the daimyo, still the same samurai, but managing both the castle and a small surrounding town. The daimyo had hundreds to a couple thousand samurai like Xiangzi at his disposal, and in turn he had hundreds of similar samurai who obeyed the shogun, the chief samurai and ruler of Japan at the moment, the legendary Tokugawa Ieyasu, who ended the feudal wars and gathered all power into his hands, intermediate classes like bannermen, vassals, bison. But we will not dwell on them in detail and take as an example a simplified scheme on Xiangzi, light armor, and a bow, because contrary to popular prejudice, not all samurai wore plate armor, and two swords is the domain of swordsmen, but there were both ordinary and mounted archers along with infantry. The samurai art of archery is still alive in Japan and many competitions are held on it. It is called Kuritsu and up to the 16th century was even above the skill of swordsmanship. But of course the traditional katana in Xiangzi also has, to be more precise, two at once, because the samurai as a privileged class carried two swords. The familiar katana was accompanied by a small wakizashi blade that was usually worn on the belt, even when Secunda Kugawa banned the public carrying of weapons. Samurai could still carry two swords wherever they wanted, as you can already understand all the power in fact concentrated in the hands of the samurai, and if you think that they were the dominant caste in Japan at the time, that's absolutely true. Officially, the Tokugawa ruler divided the country into 4 estates: samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants. But in the same decree, it was written in black and white the exclusive role of samurai, who stood above the rest of the main thing in what it was expressed, the so-called right to kill and leave any samurai from Sujin to our guard. Xiangzi had the right to execute a member of another class who did not show proper respect. A samurai offended by anything could kill a person on the spot and without any trial, even for a slanting glance, and such cases were so common. The key difference is that any Japanese who bore the title of samurai was a real warrior, that all good and our Xiangzi were brought up in the same way, and they were read the legends of samurai from childhood. They were taught Buddhist indifference to death, and built a real cult of bravery and courage, as well as unconditional obedience to their masters. In the past, before the samurai became a separate caste, they were feudal lord, a wealthy lord who ruled over thousands of peasants on his estate, but that same lord would put on his armor at the first call of his master, forgetting his power and going to battle, somewhat reminiscent of medieval Europe with its vassals. For example, for our Xiangzi, his father ordered him to spend a few nights in the cemetery to strengthen his courage and spirit, and also took the boy to public executions and night inspection of the severed heads of criminals, and it is a mandatory step. Young samurai must leave his mark on the heads to prove that he was here and passed the stage of training. Xiangzi, as well as thousands of future samurai, were starved, forced barefoot in the snow, and worked for days without sleep. It was believed that it hardened the spirit and fostered humility, but the main thing that distinguished all samurai: unconditional fulfillment of Bushido code of rules and norms of Japanese warriors. People often compare it with the code of knights, and this is a mistake. The code of knights was rather unwritten, and the postulates are often opposite. For example, attacking the enemy unexpectedly from the back for samurai was a common thing because the main victory, but at the same time any knight would consider it an insult. Of course, Bushido was violated, and the tale that any violator committed suicide is pure myth. In this case, samurai quickly disappeared. As a kind of show, suicides are few, and more often samurai simply lost respect. Our Xiangji is a good guy and did not violate. Does it mean that he is protected from possible suicide? According to the code, Xiangji's life belonged to a daimon. All daimyo samurai committed ritual suicide by juncture, but these cases were rare. The daimyo died only in battle, together with his army, so Xiang-ji is generally insured against sudden death. But what money he lives his life on is bad news. There is no point in counting how much rice Xiang-ji could buy with his salary, because Xiang-ji received his salary in rice, despite the fact that in Japan of that period there were gold and silver coins. Most of the salaries, taxes, and other payments were made in rice. Some provinces accepted some money, and some others, and therefore rice was a kind of currency with a basic measure called koku. It was understood that 1 koku was the amount of rice a person could live on for 1 year. Live for 1 year koku, for example, weighed 150 kilograms or 400 grams of rice a day. It's not much, is it? But this measure quietly operated in Japan and in modern times, although now it is equated to 180 liters, but not all so bad. Our Xiang-ji, as a common warrior Shigeru, received about 20 to 30 koku a year. The income of his daimyo could reach up to 1 million koku a year, and more fortunate than samurai in the administration of the daimyo received about 100 koku, a lot or a little. We will try to translate, all in money, which, as we have already mentioned, were two different, and samurai themselves chose how to use them and what to do with them. Let's take the most popular coin that was issued by the main house Tokugawa. It was called Deception, and in 1600 1 aben was equal to about 30 to 40 koku, so roughly speaking, rounding up, Xiang-ji earned 1 aben a year. By the way, many of us are familiar with aben. It is the reference to it in the head of the Pokemon Meowth in the legendary anime. The real aben was, in Xiang-ji's case, it is only 10 abenav or lirio, 2 types of smaller coins. Luckily, we have a document listing the price of that era in Rio. Remember that Xiang-ji has 10 a year, or about 8/10 a month, and let's see what could be bought with 1 Rio. The list is astonishing. 750 baths, 214 hairdressers, 158 watermelons, 278 books, 30 nights in a hotel, or 43 liters of juice, and 1 Rio is 1,500 damgo. On a skewer, 140 kilograms of meat, or 250 trips to the theater. Even if we are wrong, and in fact Xiang-ji received half as much, it still comes out that in a month, he could buy 150 pairs of sandals. In general, it is logical to keep in mind that our guy is in the lowest rank, but still a samurai. And they were supposed to train at least 4 hours a day and be constantly under the haircut, well-groomed and pleasant smelling. Bushido means that samurai should be an example for everyone, so Xiang-ji had to spend a lot of money on beauty. If everything is so great, then where did the Ronin from the movie with Keanu Reeves come from? In fact, we have already mentioned it. Literally, Ronin means samurai without a master. That is, contrary to the very essence of Bushido personality. Some people turned into a Ronin regardless of the reasons why their master was killed. Some went bankrupt and couldn't pay, and some people were sent to hell themselves, becoming free. Even though Bushido doesn't allow such a possibility in the real world, everything rarely happens on paper. In the end, the government even led a special law, 7 leaves and 8 returns, so that freedom-loving samurai periodically could leave the master and return. If our Xiang-ji once loses his master, he will turn into a Ronin, and it is not a happy fate. Other samurai hate them, and in many ways even envy the Ronin. They were always persecuted and made up stories about them, making them look like cannibals, but most often Ronin, and became bounty hunters, mercenaries, or even In 1701, the daimyo Asanana was sentenced to seppuku for attacking the samurai Kira, who was close to the Iron Samurai. As a result, 47 subordinates of the daimyo, samurai like our Xiang-ji, unexpectedly turned into Ronins. The situation was non-standard, and it was foolish to ask the guys to commit ritual suicide, so they were forgotten. And the newly wounded, on the contrary, doused themselves with kosita and decided to organize a ritual and legal revenge for their master. The guys put Kira's vigilance to sleep, pretending that they were drunk and in general are happy with the life of Ronin, and themselves on the contrary planned revenge, which was successfully carried out in 1703. As a result, Shogun was waiting for a stalemate situation. On the one hand, Ronin and killed his crony for what is supposed to be the death penalty, and on the other hand, they followed the code of Bushido to the end. In the end, the Shogun allowed the guys to commit ritual suicide, leaving only the youngest alive. But the fate of most of the samurai was not so romantic. Feudal wars were raging. Villages were attacked by violent Ranini, and neighbors in the form of Chinese and Koreans periodically gave heat. Most often samurai died in battle, which was considered an honor for him, but the percentage of deaths was not so great because, as we have already mentioned, any samurai was an excellent, prepared for everything warrior who, regardless of the situation, continued training. The life of our Xiangzi was not sweet, but in comparison with some historical eras, he lived very well, and we will live. It's great if you like the video and suggest other warriors to be analyzed in the comments.